All right, now we're going to be talking about square roots, and the best advice that I can ever give you to try and get really good at your square roots is to start off by making a list of your perfect squares. And I've just listed a few of them here. Um, but I would probably go all the way up to at least 15 squared. But make you a list, and then we're going to add to it as we get further and further into the roots. This section we're just going to be dealing with square roots, but eventually we'll be doing cube roots and fourth roots and all kinds of things. So for right now, let's focus in on the squares. So make a list somewhere where you can keep it while you're doing your homework with all of your perfect squares on it. Because once you figure out, what your perfect squares are, once you get comfortable with those, then the square roots are just going backwards from that. So for instance, we would say the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. And technically, even though I just said 1 here and I just said 2 here, if I asked you what are let me rephrase this. If I asked you, what do you have to square to get 4? Then your answer would be -2 and +2. Technically, there are 2 roots to a square root. And if you think about it, the reason is because if we were to take -2 and square it, we would get a +4. If we were to take regular +2 and square it, we would also get a +4. So going backwards, the square root of 4 could either be a -2 or a +2. Now, we're going to be dealing mainly with what's called the principal root. I'll write that out here. The principal root is basically just the positive root. Okay, so whenever we're dealing with these, like whenever we say what is the square root of 9, we're going to be interested in 3 because that's the principal square root of 9. So once you get this idea, this is going to make things so much easier going through. Let's practice with a few of these problems. Okay, we're going to find the square root of 1, and again we're dealing with the principal square root. So that would be 1, because if you think about it, 1 squared is what it would take to get 1. Now, here we have the negative square root of 100. Square root symbols act like grouping symbols in a way. So we have to do the root first before we take care of the negative. So the square root of 100 would be 10. And then this says, now do the opposite of that. So the opposite of 10 would be a -10. When we have fraction underneath the radical sign or the square root symbol, then it is the same thing as if we took the square root of the top and then the square root of the bottom. So the square root of 4 would be 2, and the square root of 81 would be 9, because 9 squared is 81. Again, just think about this as going forwards and backwards. Right, we can also work with decimals that way also. This literally means, what do we have to square to get 0.36? And if you're really good with your decimals, then you would know that would be 0.6, because 0.6 times 0.6 would give you 0.36. And then finally, here we have the square root of 1.6 squared. Well, if you think about what we just talked about earlier, that square root goes backwards from squaring. Those are opposite operations. They undo each other. So the square root undoes the square. And our answer here would just be 1.6.